Hi, it's Brennan Walker. I'm here. I'm going to talk to you about your audits. Are they treating you like slopes on a ski slope where you see all of these changes happening and you can never keep up with them? Let's turn on some audits with related content framework event mapping and keep your changes under control. Fantastic. Let's jump right in to doing this walkthrough and this showcase of how I'm using related content event mapping to be able to drive business value by putting in some audits instead of customizing. So this is an isolated customization, not a regular customization. So let's first look at what was the business problem. The business problem was that they wanted to keep track of what the approval process changes were when somebody was changing an approval process. This was an issue because you don't want to have audits put on all of the records. So if I go ahead over and I open, for example, EOAW criteria, you'll see that it's got a record here, no problem, but I would have to add audit options and then keep track of that on the audit record. And this is going to be maintenance heavy. Every upgrade, every time this is touched, it's going to be brought in. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't be in part of the tools upgrade or the PUM. The other issue is this all goes to that record. You're going to still have those records. Or if you did it on record level audit, then now it's going onto the PS audit table. A little bit more difficult to read. So let's find a better way. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually create a set of tables, and I've created them here. These are the AWE criteria view. We've got a whole bunch of audits set up. Criteria audit, criteria record, criteria value, path, process, stage, and step. Now, the reason that there's so many of these is because an approval process is pretty complex. And now let's layer that on top with event mapping. So what we did here in the event mapping is the approval process changes. It's that related content event mapping that you know. And it executes right here. Here's the execution. It's going to check which component you are. Either you're on the criteria or on the process, and then gets those records and sends them up for changes. This makes it so that upgrades, it doesn't matter if fields are added or taken away because they'll be tracked here. And they won't cause any problems because it is looking for field values, right? So we're not actually pushing the specific field names for all of these records. And that just makes it a lot more flexible and less likely to break. So coming up here, we've got some nice and simple, I guess you'd kind of make it nice and simple. A lot of audits for this. So you've got process, and depending on the level it has more keys. So in this case, sometimes if it's the high level, at the process level, it's only going to have one. It will have to work its way down to stages, paths, and all the way down to doing the criteria value. It gets pretty dicey with the number of fields, but that's okay. We keep track of all this and put it into the audit log. So let's go ahead and see how that works and what it looks like so that we can see the value that's driven out of it. So when you come into the approval process, and we're going to make an update, let's go ahead and grab a different one here. So we can do that. We'll look at, for example, this one right here. Why not USO3? Now USO3 doesn't have anything. I've actually added related content queries on it. So let's go ahead and take a look. There have been no changes to the process. Let's go ahead and add description change here. Let's go ahead and save that. Oh, we got to be in correct history mode, of course. So let's go ahead and say description change. All right. So when we change that, we save it. Now we've got that audit. And when the next person that comes here, they will see that it was me, Bennett, made a change from blank to description change. That's pretty easy, right? It's the primary record. Now this is where things get a little bit more exciting. We're going to go into the definition criteria, and this has some other pieces. We've got an application class. Let's change that to always true. Now what we're starting to see is this change is going to be on the definition. So when we look at those audits, now we don't want to catch anything here. We want to come over and look at the criteria. So now you can see that it used to be an app class and now it's EOA criteria true. So app class to true. We're catching just the fields that we want, just the fields that we've changed. So it's very clean and clear to be able to review this. So let's dig in another level. Now you've got paths, stages. Let's check the criteria on the path. Oh boy, there's 2 pieces of user entered criteria, change 1, and here we've got change 2. Let's change the amount greater than or equal to 20, and it is blank. Let's see what happens there. So now that we save it, we would expect this to be on the criteria values here, because we've changed it from NN to NU, right? We've also changed the criteria record because we changed the descriptions, change 1 and change 2. You can see them there. Again, this is so isolated to exactly the changes because what we're doing in the code is we're actually saying only if there is a change do we come in here. So we're checking for changes. Is it different than the original value? And we loop through the fields and we look at that and we audit the field name that it's a change. Now we've got before, a previous, and a new value. So what we're able to do is capture all of these changes with related content framework event mapping, put it onto the page so the users can see it. Now, of course, we can go into the back end and we can look and see that there are changes here as well. So of course you've got it in the database, of course, but these queries are here. Now the related content, we've got a lot there. Let me just pull that up. We've got a whole set of related content services to do this, right? So we've got a set of queries and a couple of the other pieces there. The event mapping needs to be set up as well on the approval process. Now this one's pretty straightforward because it is just at save post change. So we're going to grab that. We're going to do an EOA process audit, and that's the one that you're seeing here. This is that approval process changes. Now that's great. And then we've got those audits being logged, but now we want to see them, right? I've got it set up as related content here. So let's take a look at how we put those in, which is right here, approval. We'll pull up the approval process and you can see they're all configured here on the component level. Again, straightforward, all configuration on the front end plus that app package in the back. Now, not only is it for the related content on the approval process, but we also did that on user profiles because you want to catch when there's been a change on the user profile, on the roles for the user profile as well. So this is where things get a little bit more exciting. So as we take a look, we actually have a couple of other changes that we wanted to catch. We wanted to catch when somebody makes a change to a permission list and when somebody makes a change to a role. Changing those isn't so crazy, but I want to catch one thing where event mapping is really cool and one thing that we did that was really exciting and definitely on the more complex effort side. So let's take a look at the permission lists audit. Now this is much more complex. So let's dive into why it's complex, how we got around it, because I think this is a pretty cool showcase to have. So the idea is that this client wanted to see if there were any changes made to the permission list menu accessibility. Now this is PS auth item. So we come in here, we're going to edit the components and we're going to say, oh, you know what? We don't want them to have adjustment history. So let's take that off. And when we take that off, what you've got is you've got a modal component here that's changing auth, PS auth item. We need to capture that. So capturing that isn't as simple as just grabbing it on that page and doing it at save, because again, the save is happening here. It's on a secondary component. So how do we address that, or how did we address that? Let me show you here as soon as this is done saving. We should be able to pull up the permission list audit. We should be able to see that that component was removed. So here it was, delete. They used to have Now they don't. Let's go ahead and make a different change. Let's see if we can add a whole new menu, and see if administer deals is there. We'll go in, edit components, and we'll mature deals here. Let's grab this one. So we added this one. The same thing. Now, how are we tracking this for audit purposes and making it nice and clean? Well, auditing PS auth item is a bit of a bear. So let's refresh this. Let's take a look at what the query shows. It gets much more complex once you start looking at the auth item and how do we keep track of that. So the way that this is done is it's done through a preload and then a post check. So you're actually going through. It does take a minute when you have more components. Again, this is a lightweight server. So let's see if we can get those results here. There, just took a second to load. So you can see here, now it's got administer deals. The menu has been added. And then also this particular process, this particular component has been added as well. So what this helps us do is this helps us really see everything that's being added. How do we do it? That's the exciting part. So let's dig in. So the first piece is prior to the load, we actually do this preload at post build and save post change second sequence. And I'll talk about that in a second. But at preload, so at the preload, we actually go and take a look at, get all the PS auth item for that permission list and load it into a row set that is a component row set. So we've got those set aside in the component. There's an important piece of this because we will then, upon change, we're going to come down right here. We're going to go through all of the auth item and we're going to go through and we're going to actually see if it was found before. Maybe there's differences. If it was preloaded, it existed, now it's missing, that's going to be a deletion. See, there's the delete. If it wasn't there, add it. If there's an addition, so it's got that. If it's a change, it's got that as well. So we can see all of these differences here. Very cool. Now, same thing with audit process and security group access. So let's add those as well, just to show how those are working. Those don't need the preload. Those we're looking at a specific record. So we're going to say access group permissions. Let's add, we have a new query tree here, which is BW custom, and we'll grab an access group of audit log. That's great. And now we'll save it. I think I set this so that it takes a couple seconds to go, but this gives us all of the data that we need for authorized processes, security access group, but also that auth item. Now, after we save, we need to do a re-preload because we want to keep track again. So now we're doing that preload afterward as well, after the save post change, so that if they do any additional changes, it will then have the more recent one to compare against. So we can go ahead and pull this up here, and we can see that this had the access group audit log was added, and we could also see process group permissions as well, giving us all sorts of extra data for tracking because we want to make sure we know what's going on. Again, this one's all being stored within a single record, so it's a little bit simpler on the back end to look it up. But either way, gives us all the information that we need to be able to provide good quality audits for any changes made online. So going back, this is the advantage of a related content framework event mapping, is you can do all of these things without having to customize. It's an isolated customization. And as you can see in this example, there are some that are a little more complex, but you can work with that by doing preload and then checking it afterward. So would love to hear about other phenomenal related content event mapping usages. Send me a message, let me know. We can hop on, we can walk through it. Would love to talk through it. So with that, thank you, and we'll talk in the next PeopleSoft Development Showcase.